Today we will discuss the Counter-Reformation. Our discussion will be guided by three main questions. Number one, what methods did the Catholic Church use to stop the spread of Protestantism? Number two, what were the effects of the Counter-Reformation on European society? And number three, which of the Catholic Church's counter-reform tactics was more effective, the Inquisition or the Jesuits? First, let's review some of the causes of the Reformation. Number one, humanist values in church politics led people to question the church's authority. As we've discussed, humanists believed in the power of the individual and individual achievement, which could be found outside of the church. This was a direct attack on the church's legitimacy. In addition, the Great Schism led many people to become disillusioned with the church and to open their mind to new ideas. In addition, some church leaders were corrupt or poorly educated. This was most common on the local level. Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses on a church door in Germany. This was a list of complaints against corrupt practices in the Catholic Church, particularly the sale of indulgences. Finally, the printing press helped spread Reformation ideas, as it had with Renaissance ideas and humanist ideas earlier. As you read in the textbook, there were several early reformers who tried to change the Catholic Church from within. One example in the textbook was that of Girolamo Savonarola, who called for churches to melt down their gold and silver to buy bread for the hungry and poor. He believed that it was the church's responsibility to take care of the weakest members of society. However, the Pope excommunicated or banned him for spreading such a dangerous idea. The idea that Savonarola knew better than the Pope how the church should spend its money was considered an attack on church leadership. Hence, he was banned. The church did hear the complaints of the Protestant reformers, and the Pope commissioned certain groups, such as the Jesuits, led by Ignatius of Loyola, to improve education for the fight against the Protestant Reformation. The Jesuits were called God's Marines. Their weapon was education, and their mission was to reconvert the converted. Ignatius of Loyola led his Jesuits around the world to establish missions, schools, and universities to improve education within the church and to spread Catholic ideas. As you can see, by 1700, they already had 669 universities to spread Catholic ideas. Jesuits insisted on a high level of education for all church clergy, and the Jesuit emphasis on education remains the lasting legacy of the Counter-Reformation. In 1545, Catholic leaders began to meet in the northern Italian city of Trent in order to create a plan to restore the church's power and moral authority. This was called the Council of Trent. It was a series of meetings of over 20 years to develop new ways to fight the spread of Protestantism. Most importantly, church leaders refused to admit to compromise with the Protestants. They did this because they did not want to be seen as giving in to those who had challenged the church's power. For if others saw that the church gave in this time, they might be tempted to attack the church in other ways in the future. The Council of Trent, though, created a set of reforms that not only restored the church's power, but often met the demands of the Protestant reformers. For instance, they improved training for clergy. They also abolished the sale of indulgences. On the other hand, they created an index of forbidden books, banned books, books that were seen as illegal. These included new translations of the Bible and any writings by the humanist Erasmus, the reformist Calvin, and of course Martin Luther. In addition, they rejected the ideas of self-discipline and individual faith. That is, that the idea that salvation could be found outside of the church. The Council of Trent insisted that salvation could only be found through the church. In addition, the Council of Trent established a new church court called the Roman Inquisition. There was also a Spanish Inquisition. Both of them used similar tactics and had similar purpose. The purpose of the Inquisition was to enforce loyalty to the Catholic Church across Europe. They investigated all cases of heresy or dissent. Any words spoken against the church were able to be brought up on charges. Suspected Protestants were charged and tried by a local inquisitor or judge. Please understand that guilt was always assumed. If you were accused of heresy or dissent against the church, it was assumed that you were guilty. You were interrogated and tortured until you admitted that you had spoken out against the church or been caught with one of these banned books. Also, the testimony of neighbors was enough to convict you. So if one person accused you of it and another agreed, whether or not they were telling the truth, that was often enough to make you found guilty. This caused chaos, as many people left the Catholic Church as a protest against the Inquisition. Catholics and non-Catholics began persecuting or attacking each other for their beliefs. Lutherans denounced the Anabaptists, another Protestant sect. Calvinists denounced the Lutherans. Catholics and Protestants consider Muslims and Jews to be heretics or without God. Muslims are forced to convert to Catholicism or leave Spain. The Muslims had a large population within Spain, but once the Spanish Inquisition came in, it became very hard to remain Muslim in Spain. Finally, inquisitors everywhere scared non-Catholics to return to the church. Let's contrast the two methods used by the Catholic Church to bring people back into it. On one hand, you have the Jesuits, who spread out with a message of goodwill and education about Catholic ideas. On the other hand, you have the constant threat and fear that the Inquisition caused. Which one do you think would lead you to become a loyal member of the church once again? Education or fear? As a result of the Counter-Reformation, you saw more religious wars across Europe. You had the Italian Wars, the Peasants' Wars, and the wars between the Holy Roman Emperor and a group of Lutheran princes in Germany. The last of these was settled by something called the Peace of Augsburg, which forced each prince to choose one faith, Catholicism or Lutheranism, for all of their subjects. Your textbook goes into much greater detail about all of these wars, and I encourage you to review that section. Finally, let's sum up by looking at the effects of the Reformation, and then again compare it to the causes. As a result of the Reformation, we saw many Protestant sects develop. For example, the Baptists, Lutherans, Calvinists, the Reformed sects, the Anglicans. The church leaders reformed the Catholic Church with all of the methods that we've described today. Religious intolerance increased. This led to many wars across Europe, and those conflicts spread all around the continent. As we can see, many of our causes match our effects. Most of those ideas in the causes, the ideas about poorly educated and corrupt church leaders, Martin Luther's complaints, the spread of humanist values, these are all addressed by church leaders in the Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Church, though, was very clear that salvation must be attained only through the church and cannot be sought in other ways. This concludes our discussion of the Counter-Reformation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me at any time. I encourage you to review the textbook once again, as well as your workbook on this chapter in order to get a better understanding of it. Thank you for listening.